scholarship corruption and the identity politics and the radical politics. And you also recently mentioned about careerism and opportunism. All these kind of things are now emerging in the academic hemisphere. There are these politicians, bureaucrat elites, the higher echelons who are interconnected on the top.
On the one hand, there is a handful of white Jewish supremacist billionaires who are using their immense financial wealth to try to crush the student demonstrations and undisguised assault on academic freedom by a private entity in American history. There has never been anything like it. 2 Ivy League university presidents were toppled. The rest were terrified.
Okay, so it is an extreme privilege and an honor for me to get to speak to one of my childhood academic heroes. And I would first like to introduce you in my own way. And I'll introduce you by using your words. Professor, you said that in this Gaza genocide, there have been 3 heroes that have emerged. One you said are the Palestinian doctors and the paramedics, and we can add the Palestinian journalists as well, who despite being in the killing field, continued and remained steadfast to saving the lives and speaking out for the Palestinian lives and the Gazan lives. So they deserve a Nobel Peace Prize. Second, you said, are the South Africans who had the courage and the bravery to hold the hand of the biggest criminal in the world and take them to the biggest court of the world, the International Court of Justice, where they officiated the word of genocide against Israel. And also now they have won the case on the settlements as well. So they also deserve a Nobel Peace Prize. Third, you said, are the Houthis, who feeling for the pain of their brothers in Gaza because they went through the blockade, inhumane blockade as well. So they said there will be no business as usual, using your words, there shall be no business as usual until the issue of Palestine is resolved. So they deserve a Nobel Peace Prize. But I'll say to the top of my voice that there is a fourth person. There is a fourth person who also deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. And that person, whenever there are major events in history, like wars or conflicts or genocides, people only look at 2 things. Number 1 is who are the opposing groups, and number 2, who was on the truth. Who was on the truth, and who was the oppressor and who was the oppressed. And for ascertaining who was on the truth, they always look towards academics and historians. The best academic for the past several decades on this Israel-Palestine issue, I believe, is none other than Professor Norman Finkelstein, and I believe you, sir, deserve a Nobel Peace Prize on this.
Well, thank you for your kind words. Excuse me. When I made that statement, there was not yet another development, which was the student demonstrators. And that began probably, about 3 months ago, the demonstrations. And they too showed really exemplary courage and just sheer human decency. For an American student, now I'm saying strictly for an American student, it was a very high price. Students were expelled, students were suspended, students were denied the right to attend their graduations, students went to jail and accumulated an arrest record. They paid the price, and they were steadfast literally to the last day, till the graduation ceremony. So I would put them in that, I would add them to that list of three that I mentioned, or that you quoted earlier. I would also note, in addition to the doctors in Gaza, was the large number of doctors around the world who volunteered to go to Gaza and risk their lives. At least in the West, the doctor, a medical doctor, is the highest paying profession. And it takes a lot of talent and conscientiousness to achieve the position of a medical doctor. And to risk all of it to go over to Gaza, it's a deeply moving testament to an aspect of humanity that's sometimes forgotten in all the horrors that unfold every day, everywhere.
Yes.
I'm gonna just go get a glass of water to clear
Yeah,
my
please.
throat.
Yes.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about these academics. I mean, you have written the book, I'll Burn That Bridge when you've written this book. And you have mentioned about the scholarship corruption and the identity politics and the radical politics. And you also recently mentioned about careerism and opportunism. All these kind of things are now emerging in the academic hemisphere, and we are suffering from this. I myself, in my country, also suffer from this and speak out against this, where there is a culture of show-off education now. And we have recently even seen the ousting of presidents in Harvard, MIT, and Penn. And the respect academics are losing because of this oligarchic capitalist system, oligarchic militant capitalist system, where there are these politicians, bureaucrat elites, the higher echelons, who are interconnected on the top, and they are, controlling these academic institutions to the way they like. And then we have many academics on the seats who culture, like to use the words, who worship money and worship the chairs. They worship the politicians, the chairs as well. So this kind of things that are emerging in the academic institutions, which is weakening our academic institutions. How can we change this? What is the way forward on this?
I think one has to always look at the picture in the whole. It's important not to just look at one side or look at the other side. So in the case of academia, you see two phenomena going on at the same time. On the one hand, there is a handful of white Jewish supremacist billionaires who are using their immense financial wealth to try to crush the student demonstrations on the college campuses. And not just the student demonstrations in the college campuses, they even contacted the mayor of New York and demanded that he crush the demonstrations, or they wouldn't support him in the forthcoming mayoral election. They have huge amounts of money. That's a consequence of the fantastic polarization of wealth in our society, such that for them, 50 million, literally, this is not an exaggeration, $50 million here. William Ackman tells Harvard, I'm going to withhold my $50 million contribution. Another academic tells the University of Pennsylvania, he was a graduate of the Wharton School of Business, he's going to withhold $100 million. Another figure, Sternlicht, he tells Brown University, these are all Ivy League universities, that he's going to withhold a huge sum of money. There's Kraft. He tells Columbia University he's going to withhold a huge sum of money. And so the universities buckle to the pressure. They march to the beat of the Jewish supremacist drum. And it was a very ugly picture. It was the most brutal, vicious, and undisguised assault on academic freedom by a private entity in American history. There has never been anything like it. Two Ivy League university presidents were toppled. The rest were terrified. People like President Shafiq at Columbia, the president of MIT. The MIT president held back. She was actually quite good, but then she buckled to the pressure also. So that was a very ugly phenomenon. But then we have to see the other side, which is, as I said earlier, the students stood their ground and risked quite a lot. In the United States, Columbia University, for example, it costs $80,000 a year. It's not a small sum of money. And students were willing to risk losing all their semester's credit, being suspended, being expelled. So there was, on the one side, the brutal, vicious assaults, and on the other, there was the very heroic, principled, courageous resistance. As to the question what you can do about it, I don't personally believe you can do very much about it. These kinds of tendencies, the succumbing, the giving in to careerism, opportunism, the desire for really in the great scheme of things, it's pretty petty stuff. The desire to be invited to a conference, to attend a wine and cheese party, to get a guest lectureship, pretty small stuff.
Yes.
But in academia, those are big things.
Yes.
Henry Kissinger, the archetypical academic war criminal, he once said, the battles in academia are so vicious because the stakes are so puny. And I think there is some truth to that you really are fighting over nothing. Academics will loathe and hate each other. Yes. Because one forgot or decided not to cite the other in a footnote.
Yes.
A footnote.
I know.
The absence of a footnote citation is enough to... It's the equivalent of dropping an atomic bomb in academic life. It's so stupid.
Yes.
So I think that's kind of built into the system. Yeah, you can't do much about it.
Yeah, the politicians and the ones in the higher echelons, they have this oligarchic capitalist mindset, and this gets transformed into the academic institutions as well, and they start bullying each other and all these kind of things we see happening in the academia. And I often say that you've written all about how identity politics is a major problem in academia, and I also say about this that the biggest problem we are facing in the world is that there is no respect anymore for the criteria for good and bad. I think the one thing that academics can offer to the world, to the politicians, to the higher echelons, is this moral legitimacy that the Western institutions are lacking and the entire world is lacking right now. The moral legitimacy is lacking in this world. We are, the prophets came and all these people came. The only thing they fought was for the criteria for good and bad. And this is like non-existent. We see what Israel is doing, right?
Well, it was very interesting to watch how woke culture, which is basically the liberal academic culture, the universities are mostly, at least in the social studies, I won't speak about the natural sciences. In the social studies, the humanities, as they're called,
Yeah.
they're overwhelmingly woke. And the organs of those institutions in the United States, like the New York Times, the liberal woke New York Times, the liberal woke Atlantic magazine, the liberal woke New Yorker magazine, the liberal woke New York Review of Books. It was very interesting to observe how these woke institutions, which are so anti-racist, they're so anti-racist. It was interesting to watch how they reacted to the events since October 7th. So let's just take one example. As you know, in woke culture, the most sacred figure is the Black woman, because she suffers from what's called a stupid term, intersectional oppression. She's Black and she's a woman, okay? Now, there were 3 prominent victims of the assault on critics of the Israeli genocide, 3 prominent critics who were Black women. Claudine Gay, president of Harvard University, Candace Owens, a right-wing figure, but quite prominent,
Yes.
Black woman. Brianna Joy Gray, Black woman, very impressive Black woman, probably the most impressive of the whole generation of podcasters. Harvard BA, Harvard law degree, very smart woman. Now, all 3 of them were canceled, to use the expression of woke culture. Okay, all 3 were canceled. Was there a hue and cry of outrage in the New York Times, in Atlantic magazine, in New Yorker magazine, in the New York Review of Books? Not a word. Not a word. Because the whole cancel culture is completely fake. It's a ruling elite strategy in order to do 2 things. Number one, well, really one thing, 2 things. Number one, it's to create a new base in the Democratic Party to replace the white working class, which has in large parts defected to the Republican Party. And it does so by trying to create a base among identity groups, women, Black women, gays, lesbians, transgenders, trying to create a base not on class, grounded not in class, but grounded in what are called sexual and racial and ethnic identities. That's its first purpose. Its second purpose is to derail and discredit any working class candidacy by claiming it's insufficiently sensitive to race or to women. And you saw that very clearly with Bernie Sanders, when all the woke people attacked him. First of all, Angela Davis, a hero of woke culture, saying that Bernie was weak she said, on the Black question. And then they started to accuse Bernie's candidacy of being based on what was called Bernie Bros, namely was all white males who supported Bernie Sanders at the expense of poor oppressed white women like Hillary Clinton. So it was very revealing for me to watch how, just like during the Bernie Sanders candidacy, the whole woke culture turned against him.
Yep.
It was also interesting for me to observe how, when Israel perpetrated and continues to perpetrate a genocide, the whole woke culture suddenly fell silent.
Yeah.
When even Black women, those victims of intersectional oppression, were being one by one canceled.
Yeah. So yeah, no doubt, power abuse. We need to challenge this, and we have to change the narrative on this.